This is alarming. Okay, I'm gonna turn off the sound on the computer because it gets very annoying after the entire day of listening to that. Okay, so, oh God. Okay. So welcome to grade 4. So all of the teachers have stayed the same from last year as far as English goes. So I'm still the homeroom teacher teaching math and English, as well as art. And of course, teacher Zoe is teaching all the Chinese courses in the homeroom. And then we have for science, it's still Mr. Glotzbach who teaches for red downstairs. And for PE, it's Mr. Richard, who some of you may know from kindergarten, and he teaches many of the PE classes here at USI. So I'll just go over like a quick agenda, like what to know, the new English curriculum, which I know is hot topic for everyone, and then our midterms and finals, and then things to know and remember. So for grade 4, there is a lot more emphasis on independence, and that's definitely reflected with our new curriculum with MyView, which I'll talk about more. So students will definitely need to be able to work independently and rely on themselves to complete assignments, because many of the assignments are through the MyView curriculum are geared towards students' individual progress. And as far as answering questions and complete sentences, that hasn't really changed, but it's also really knowing what to ask, because sometimes students they might be confused about certain things and they'll either feel shy or just confused and not know what to ask. So kind of a policy I have in my classroom is if you have a question, ask it. Like there are no dumb questions. No one's going to make you feel like your question isn't valid. I want everyone to feel like anything that they have a question about will be answered. And then of course, integrity, being honest and responsible for yourself is really important, and respecting your classmates, your classroom, your teachers, and your school, and yourself. So just a quick sidebar, but the USI disciplinary policy was updated last semester. So if you wanted to take a closer look at that, I'm going to post this onto Google Classroom and ClassDojo. So these are the textbooks that we're going to be using in class this year. So we're using the MyView, or it should say international. I didn't get the right photo from Google, but it's the International MyView Literacy 3.2, as well as the practice workbook that goes along with it. It's the Pathway to Science 3 book. And then my pals are here for A for semester 1 and for B for semester 2. So that will be science is taught by Mr. Glotzbach, but the books that I'll be using in class will be MyView 3.2, as well as the practice workbook, and then these 2 math books. And the ebook, for the login at home, we are waiting for the publisher to send us the login codes for students for MyView. So hopefully next week, but I don't know. It's up to the publisher. So in the meantime, I will be posting PDF documents that are available through like the teacher login onto Google Classroom, so students can access the book at home without having to lug around the big heavy textbook. And if you wanted to, since it is a new book to everyone, it is in all of your students' desks, so you could take it out and take a look at it if you want.
So if the reading street is no longer used?
No longer used, yeah.
The coming semester?
Correct, yeah. The whole school, grades 1 through 6, are no longer using Reading Street. We're using MyView. And MyView is published by the same, it's by the same publisher as Reading Street. It's by Pearson Realize and Savas Learning, which are American publishers. MyView is used more often in American schools that meet like the American Common Core standard of learning. So, and also the MyView International book has a lot more ELL, or English as a second language, kind of ideology behind it. So that was some of the big reasons why we decided to change to MyView. Also, Reading Street is a little bit outdated, so MyView is a lot more current. So I'll talk about kind of the pros and cons of MyView and compare it to Reading Street in a minute. But just as far as MyView goes, It follows Common Core standards from the United States. And this is just sort of this is from the MyView website from the teachers portal. And I'll post this whole slideshow onto Google Classroom. You can look at it more closely if you like. It kind of just goes into detail about what the learning standards are for MyView and what the curriculum expectations are. So there's different reading workshops, and it kind of shows you how a typical MyView lesson plan is broken down. But since we are using it in a different country from the United States, we obviously kind of took their ideas and sort of made them make sense for our classroom. But the MyView curriculum does have a much more stronger emphasis on writing and individual thought. So you'll see that reflected in your students' work. So the way we're going to be covering the units and the stories with MyView is really similar to how we covered it with Reading Street. So there's 5 stories per cycle, and there will be 7 to 8 school days per story. And within those units, there will be vocabulary, phonics, spelling words, comprehension skills, the main story, grammar, and writing. Not necessarily in this order, but those are all the skills that will be covered. And for math, which I'll talk about a little bit, the reason why a lot of students ask, like, oh, why do we start with chapter 5 and then finish with chapter 1? The reason is because we do it in the order that reflects the Chinese math books. So they're learning the same skills at the same time. So it's kind of, they're learning the same skill in both English and Chinese, because it's a lot more confusing for students when they're doing one thing in Chinese math and something completely different in English math. So we kind of just match it, because the skills are similar, they're just not in the same order. So for MyView, one of the biggest differences, probably the biggest difference, is that MyView is really focused on annotation, which means like it's expected that students write directly into the textbook. With Reading Street, there is basically nowhere for students to write in their book. But for MyView, there's about half the book is meant for students to write in. So when you're flipping through the pages of MyView, you'll see that there's a lot of pages that are just geared towards writing. And they come before and after the story, whether it's writing to answer questions about vocabulary that they learn in the sentence, writing to build skills towards their writing workshop, which comes at the end of the unit. But annotation and writing your own notes in the textbook is really important for MyView curriculum. So students will be going through all of the pages of MyView together as a class. The MyView textbook, I'm never going to be assigning as homework. Whenever I'm introducing a new skill or a new concept, it'll be something that we do together. I'm not going to expect students to learn something completely new that they've never seen before by themselves as homework. So the MyView textbook is geared towards annotation and student note-taking. So because I'm going to be posting all of the pages of MyView onto Google Classroom and ClassDojo, it's actually, in my opinion, better if students leave their MyView textbook in school. That way they not only don't have to carry a heavy book back and forth, but if they happen to forget their textbook at home, then they don't have any of the resources we're going to be using in class the next day. So also, if you remember from last year, our unit tests, which will be every 2 stories, which you'll see a slideshow or slide page for in a few minutes, but the unit tests will still be open book, like they were for Reading Street. So students taking good notes during our class, and of course I'll be walking around the room and checking everyone's paying attention and staying focused and writing what they're supposed to be writing and writing my own answers on the board that they could write. But when they do that, they'll basically have everything they need to know for the open book test. So the better they are at independent note-taking, the more likely they'll have a much higher score. So it's important that students stay focused during the class because all of their notes are going to be in one place. As opposed to last year, we had notebooks, we had loose leaf paper, we had the RW book, we had all these different places that students would take notes. And they would, of course, the more things you give a kid to hold, the more likely it is they're just going to lose all of it. So I like that with MyView, that it's one book, one place to put everything you need to know. So the practice workbook, if you look at it, it's in your students' desks. Compared to the RW book, it's probably less than half the size, which in some ways is good, in some ways maybe not, but the practice workbook is new. Students, of course, love it because it's so much shorter, but it is much easier for me to collect and grade, which is fine, but there isn't as much like necessarily good studying tools within the practice workbook. So it is important that we do it and it will be collected and graded, but it is really short. And if you look at it, there are no pages in practice workbook that require writing. Whereas the RW book had a lot of pages for writing, which for just the type of paper that is used to make these workbooks, it's really difficult to grade like large amounts of writing that are written with pencil on this type of paper because it's kind of hard to see. So it's kind of nice that the writing will all be done within the brown writing books, but then they also don't have the RW book, they could just use that as their study tool. Whereas now students will definitely need to use the online resources and their MyView book, especially to study. The PW book, which we're calling it instead of RW, because practice workbook, we're calling it PW, it's more of just an in-class quick follow-up, make sure you understood what we just did kind of quick thing. So like if we do spelling in one class period, there will be one page in the practice workbook that's about spelling. Whereas in RW book, there'll be like 4 pages about spelling for each chapter. So it's much shorter and much more condensed, and it's really just kind of meant to reinforce what we just did in class. But again, it won't be used as a homework assignment, it'll just be used in class. We'll finish all of the pages of the PW book in class. So for homework, the main homework assignments that they're gonna have are vocabulary sentences, grammar, and English and creative writing. And then for math, it will be the pupils book. So the math workbook, I'm going to be using in class. So with the reason why I kind of switch it, because the pupils book is a lot more like a textbook and the workbook is more like a homework book. But the reason why I prefer to use the workbook as our in-class learning tool is because there's no instruction in the workbook. There's nothing in the workbook that teaches you how to do these new math concepts. Whereas in the pupils book, if we cover a new story in the workbook, like chapter 1 that we started this week is numbers 1 through 100,000 and how to name them, how to know what place value they're in. So if a student is really strong in that, then they'll be able to do the homework in the pupils book very easily. But if a student was confused and maybe didn't understand everything we did, with the pupils book as homework, they have instruction for 3 or 4 pages that shows them what we learned in class. Whereas the workbook, it's just questions. So I like to use the workbook as our in-class tool and go over all of the questions there, and then use the pupils book as homework. So students have the opportunity to relearn and kind of read on their own if they aren't sure if they understood something that we did in class. So the workbook will be collected, I want to say like every other chapter, and I'll grade it. I don't put like a percentage grade for the workbook. I just put a grade for completion, and then I put if they've done things correctly, if it's neat, if it's organized, or if it's a big mess, I'll have them redo it. But yeah, I don't put a percentage grade for the workbook for math. And the pupils book, I'm not going to collect it. That's going to be just a student learning tool. So we are changing the way that we're doing the vocabulary sentences homework. The students will see this on Monday, so you're seeing this before they are, but they'll probably be happy about it because it's a lot less writing for just the vocabulary sentences. Because in my opinion, I've done vocabulary sentences at USci for like 4 years now. And I always find it to be a little bit of kind of arbitrary work to just copy a sentence from the story. So I decided to change, all of grade 4 decided to change it. So they're just going to be writing the vocabulary word and the grammar label and the definition. And then they'll be gluing a worksheet into the homework book with it, where they just have to fill in the blanks for the vocabulary words. So instead of just taking the time to copy from the book. As a lot of students, they'll just copy kind of mindlessly. So it doesn't really build any learning skills. So now they actually are building reading comprehension skills by doing it this way and learning the actual meaning of the word rather than just like copying. So this is less writing for them and a better learning skill. So I think it'll go over well, hopefully. And it's also really similar to the way that the vocabulary questions are formatted on the tests and final exams and midterms. And yeah, that's all it says right there. So for writing, that has changed a lot this semester, or with MyView as well. So if you look in the MyView book, the end of each chapter, there's the purple pages are called Writer's Workshop. So it really gears students towards understanding the writing skill rather than in Reading Street, like each unit would just have, like if the story was about like a narrative nonfiction, the writing would be narrative nonfiction. If the story was a poem, the writing was a poem. But with MyView, each unit has 5 stories, and all 5 stories have the same writing skill. So each unit, the writing skill becomes more and more advanced, so they get a deeper understanding for what type of writing they're doing, which I think is a lot better. Because when you have a student do 1 week, they're writing a narrative nonfiction. The next week, they're writing a poem. The week after that, they're writing a biography. Like they don't really learn all it is to know about one thing. They're just kind of doing the assignment to get it done. But when you do one skill and you build on that skill each week for the full time of the unit, I think it's really going to help them not just write to complete an assignment, but write to actually understand what they're writing about. So I'm excited for the writing with MyView. I think it's going to be an improvement. So the tests and exams, there will be. Did I put that? Oh. So there will be 2 spelling quizzes, or sorry, 3 spelling quizzes before and after the midterm, 2 English unit tests before and after the midterm. There will be a math test at the end of each chapter, and then there will be 2 reading fluency tests before and after each unit or each midterm. And then the midterm and the final exam are worth 50% of the grade. So on the midterm progress report, so the midterm is on October 27th, and then you'll receive that midterm progress report soon after that. The progress report does not include the grade for the midterm. The final report card, which comes after the final exam, which is on, I want to say January 11th or 12th. I have to look at the calendar up over there. But after the final exam is the midterm and the final exam are on the final report card at the end of the semester. So the midterm and final exam are worth 25% of the grade each. So they're pretty important. Last year it was weighted even higher. They were worth 30% of the grade each. So the weight was lowered. So now there is a little bit more flexibility with students who do really well on homework assignments and in-class assignments and maybe struggle with the timed tests and the pressure. So the percentage is lowered. It's from it being 25, it was 30% each to now being 25% each. So we'll see how that goes with the grades, the final grades. And make sure that when you are receiving all of the homework books that you're signing, I'm always going to be posting all of the slides or all the, since we just started with MyView, I don't have slideshows made up yet, but hopefully soon I'll have them made up. But there will be slideshows. For now, there'll be PDF documents of the student book for MyView, as well as the math workbook and math pupils books with the answers. And make sure that you are checking the communication book, checking Class Dojo, and you could always contact me directly if you have any questions about anything to do with English or something that happened during class, in English class, anything that you want to know from me, you can message me directly on Dojo. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, thank you for coming. Does anyone have any questions? I know it's a lot. No. Okay, all right, well, thank you very much.